Cameron Stewart joins us, our US contributor and a correspondent for The Australian there. Cameron, what's your take on the Mueller statement? Because he didn't clear Trump, but has he said anything further to what the report had within its detail?
Kieran, it was very interesting actually. Robert Mueller, the mystery man in Washington for the past 2 years, just appeared on stage with barely an hour's notice. It was a remarkable moment. And he came on, and like any good lawyer, he stuck very closely to the 448-page Mueller report. But I think the news here was in what he chose to emphasise in that report. He emphasised that he had no choice, no option, he said, but to not lay any criminal charges against the president because of Department of Justice guidelines. In other words, he says it was unconstitutional for him to consider doing so. He also then added that he pointedly did not exonerate the president for obstruction of justice, saying if he was confident the president did not commit a crime, he would have said so. Now, that's a really interesting series of things for Mueller to point out. And so what it really does is, what he's trying to say here is that he prioritised the legal aspects over the evidence, if you like. Now, that, of course, is fairly contrary to the argument that Donald Trump and the White House have been saying, and that is that they are exonerated because of the evidence, an examination of the evidence. So that's really quite an important distinction, Kieran, and it really energised the Democrats and it energised Donald Trump and the White House. Trump came out and tweeted, this is, this changes absolutely nothing. The fact is, with Mueller, it's case closed. And he was backed by the White House in doing that. Yet, by contrast, the Democrats, a whole slew of Democratic presidential contenders, from Kamala Harris to Elizabeth Warren to Cory Booker, came out and said, no, this absolutely highlights the case and the need for impeachment, because they say what Robert Mueller was doing was he's saying, my hands are tied, it's up to you, the Congress, to meter out whatever punishment you think the US president deserves. So it really was a remarkable moment when this mystery man for 2 years turned up in front of everyone today.
I want to explore the impeachment prospects in a moment and the Democratic voices who are calling for that. But firstly, in terms of Mueller himself, just to get into the detail, he's basically using the technicalities of the Justice Department guidelines. That's what he's referring to, isn't he, as the reason why he hasn't laid charges or sought to lay charges against the president?
Yes, I mean, really what he's saying, Kieran, is that even if he had really red-hot evidence that the President of the United States had committed a crime, he couldn't actually charge him anyway. He says there's no constitutionality to that. You can't indict a sitting president. And in fact, he said that in the interests of fairness, he shouldn't even mention the fact that he thought a president might be guilty, because that president could not actually face court to face those charges. And so Mueller is saying, look, you know, my hands are tied. That's precisely my situation. So don't go and read too much into the fact that there were no charges laid. I mean, he's not implying that Donald Trump has committed a crime, but he's certainly not implying that he did not commit a crime. And the very fact that he so openly left this question open publicly and pointedly today is really, really, it's caused a real sensation here in Washington, in the sense that both sides of politics are really fighting hard to maintain their position, because it really has unsettled the status quo.
Yeah, that line about if he was confident that he hadn't committed a crime, he would have said so. And now Donald Trump, though, his take is very different to that. He's saying it's case closed, as you alluded to earlier, Cameron, that he has argued, the White House has argued, that he's been exonerated, basically.
That's right. And I mean, while that's not true that he's been exonerated, certainly from a political standpoint, Kieran, I mean, Donald Trump still has the advantage here, very much so. I mean, he can simply go to his rallies during his re-election campaign and say there were no charges of collusion, there were no charges of obstruction, no collusion, no obstruction. That will be the mantra. So I think Donald Trump still has the advantage, but certainly Mueller's appearance today has changed the atmospherics. There's certainly much more clambering on the side of the Democrats to really look at the question of impeachment. The House Democrat leader, Nancy Pelosi, was one of the few ones who sort of kept her cool a bit today. She said she was concerned by Mueller's comments, but she didn't actually mention the I word. And so there's going to be a really big debate here in Washington amongst the Democrats as to what they do. do they go forward with this? Because there's certainly no suggestion at this early stage that Mueller's comments have changed the opinions of any Republican senators. And of course, the Senate would have to pass impeachment to turf Donald Trump out of office. So that simply won't be happening at this point. So all the Democrats could do would be have, if you like, a symbolic impeachment in the House of Representatives. And that's the debate they're having at the moment in the wake of what Robert Mueller said today.
And on that, Kamala Harris, one of those you mentioned, of course, a former Attorney General in California. Cory Booker's represented on the congressional committees relevant to this issue as well. So these people obviously got a background in the area. They think they've got an argument to make. Is this all about the politics, though, of 2020?
Look, a lot of it is the politics of 2020, Kieran. I mean, a lot of the voices on the Democrat side are the presidential contenders who want to go out there on the hustings and say that Trump should be impeached. Nancy Pelosi, of course, who rules the House, is much more cautious. She's concerned that impeaching Trump would just hurt them politically. There'd be a backlash against the Democrats in the same way there was against the Republicans when they did precisely the same thing, you know, to Bill Clinton. Look, another thing also with Robert Mueller's comments today, it was interesting. He said that he did not intend to testify in front of Congress. That his statement today was a one and only, and he wasn't going to say any more. Now, of course, that would rob the Democrats of a star witness, if you like, should they pursue the impeachment proceedings. Robert Mueller says, you know, I'm done, I'm going to go. And in fact, it's interesting, Robert Mueller actually said his opinion, the most important part of the Mueller report, was the indictments against the Russians, was the general finding that Russia was enormously active in trying to disrupt the 2016 US presidential election. So that was one of the key things. And Mueller also made the point, Kieran, of defending his investigators, saying they are of the highest integrity, which, of course, is a rebuttal to Donald Trump, who's long attacked Mueller and his team for being angry Democrats.
And finally, you've already touched on this a bit, Cameron, but just a broader reflection on where the politics are at for Trump, because from afar, it looks like so many in the Trump circle have been caught up with legal questions, not always relevant or pertinent to this particular investigation, but some of them emerged through this probe. But your view is more broadly in terms of the politics of this. His base is rock solid behind Trump.
Look, the real issue here, Kieran, is that the Mueller report and all of the things that flow from it resound very heavily in the big American cities, of course, especially in Washington. But I mean, these cities are largely Democrat-controlled. Democrats are the majority in almost all of the big American cities, and that's where the Mueller report rebounds and makes a noise. Out there in the country, out in Trump counties and through Trump states where I travel, I do not get this at all. I mean, the Mueller report is almost a non-issue to them. They care about jobs, wages. They care about putting food on the table. I mean, these are the people that voted Trump into office. They really don't seem to care very much about Mueller. In fact, interestingly, a lot of the candidates, Democrat candidates, even when they're out in the hustings now, don't speak that much of the Mueller probe when they're out there. I think the bottom line for Donald Trump is the economy is very, very strong here in the US. That's going to be his most powerful ally, if you like, as he goes to the election. So while this is very dramatic today, I don't see it affecting his prospects in a large way.